Hello, EnderSword here again, this time with a Bronze League game, and if possible, a low-level Bronze League game. Jakesully was the player that posted this on TeamLiquid.net looking for advice, and he is a self-proclaimed forever bronze player. So we're going to take a look from his perspective to see what can be done to try and improve this game. His opponent for today is going to be Feralchains, the Zerg player on the bottom side of the map here. We are on Metalopolis. The three things that I'm going to focus on most during this game are, number one, the idea definitely of expanding. Not only is there a lack of expansions at appropriate times during this game, but when he expands, he's not actually even taking all of the resources there, so we'll see that happening over the course of this game. The second thing that I'm going to look at is the idea of getting the appropriate upgrades for things, and just the really big difference that can make in any game. So there will be a few clashes where it looks like the Protoss player should be coming out ahead in the engagement, but actually doesn't, just due to a complete lack of upgrades on his part. The third thing that we're going to look at is actually developing a plan of attack. Very often one of the problems in super low level play is that the player simply just builds stuff, they just make things, they kind of respond to what their opponent is doing, but there's never a plan at which they were going to go attack the enemy. There's never actually a cohesive strategy on, once I get this, I can go try and take him out. I can actually counter what he's doing. They just play survival for a long period of time, and eventually they just get beat by the opponent. So we'll kind of see that happen in this game as well. We saw just earlier there, as I was talking, a single drone coming in and Jake pulling off 5 probes to go and try and chase it down. Don't do that sort of thing, obviously. You will occasionally see, if you're doing something that you don't want to be scouted or you're trying to be secretive on, and they come, like, say, through the mineral line and you feel like you can just snipe them, then go ahead, but there's definitely no reason to be actually chasing a scouting drone around your base or something. You're just losing mining time for no real reason on that, so just try and avoid it. The other thing going up here is this wall off isn't a good wall off at all. This is actually twice as wide as it should be, so the Zealot isn't really blocking. If the Zerg player was going to run in with a bunch of lings, he'd be able to get a good surround on the Zealot. They're not coming in single file with it this wide, and he'd actually be able to just push through and get completely past the Zealot to begin with. So this isn't the type of wall off you want to be doing. You want to wall off with the gateway and the cybernetics core such that you're making a much narrower choke. This is kind of 2 zealots wide. You can do it in a way that is 1 zealot wide. You'll see it in tons of games. Almost any replay that you see with a Protoss player against a Zerg is going to have basically the same formation. There's going to be a pylon here, the gateway against this corner, and the cybernetics core here, allowing a very narrow passageway that the Zealot then blocks. So learn that and make sure that you know how to do that, or else you're going to get a lot of Zealot run-bys or dangerous situations going on. Now here, he's going for a bit of a 4-gate opening, but he's also thrown in the forge there. If you want to be making an aggressive opening like a 4-gate is, it's usually relying on getting a lot of speed that you can very quickly get a large army out, but by throwing in the forge you're actually delaying this a lot. And most 4-gates will have actually hit by now, that the warp gate will be done, these will be ready, and that will just simply go. He's got the pylon down here to get ready to go against his opponent, but this is just really late, and it's delayed a lot by having that forge, getting these cannons down. All of this is just really delaying the entire process. So on the one hand, these gateways are indicating something very, very aggressive, but these photon cannons are completely indicating a defensive protecting yourself strategy, and those are completely incompatible with one another. If you're making something ultra aggressive, then that's what you have to do. If you're being defensive, then that's what you should be doing. You can't usually just really mix the two like this, that they're just incompatible, and you're going to end up doing neither of them very well. You're not going to be adequately defended, and you're not going to be aggressive. You're just going to be in a no man's land, and he ends up kind of aborting the entire plan to do a 4-gate and doesn't end up using this at all, and not due to any specific scouting information. We can see down here, looking at the Zerg base, had he actually done a 4-gate, it probably would have worked out perfectly fine. There's 4 roaches here, there's no real defense. He's instead going for some early upgrades. 1 spine crawler just now going down at 8 minutes and 20 seconds. It would have actually been quite easy to overwhelm this. There's not a lot that the Zerg player could have done to stop it, but instead he kind of aborted that plan for no specific reason, and it's put him behind economically and put him behind in what his military could have been. Also at this time he hasn't yet expanded yet. This takes a lot of minerals to do. You've got 200 tied up in cannons. You've got the forge here, which he never during the course of the game does any upgrades with, so it was only placed to get the cannons up. We've got robo facility and 4 warp gates. This is really delaying any potential expansion that could be going down by tying that up. So again, you're really putting yourself at a disadvantage if these aren't actually used to their full potential. The other thing that's habitually happening here is supply blocking, of course. He's got nothing in production. He's got no additional pylons going down at this time. He's just not making full use of these things. So despite spending all that money on them, he's not getting full use out of the warp gates. He will constantly be supply blocking himself. Right now, that's not even the issue. He's just neglecting to use it. He's not making probes out of the Nexus, and the chrono boost is at absolutely full at the moment. So there's literally no production whatsoever. It kind of makes me wonder, what are you even doing? Like, if you just kind of looked at this game at this point, you would think that Jakesully went to the bathroom or something. Nothing is moving. There's no real attention being paid to anything. Nothing is being built. Nothing's being developed. There's no advancement in the economy, no advancement in technology, just nothing at all. So finally, this Nexus is actually starting. Tons of money has been saved up at this point, and just nothing is being added on. He is opting to go for a Stargate now, probably as some sort of attempt to counter roaches, thinking that getting Void Rays out would be good against the completely ground-based roach army. While the Void Rays do certainly attack roaches, while they can't be attacked back by the roaches, they generally are a pretty inefficient way to deal with them, just due to the nature of that weapon and the number of hit points that roaches have. It's very hard for them to go through a lot of roaches. They just kill them so slowly that it's not worth the effort. You're better off spending the money on a better ground army, or going to something like Colossus or Immortals that more efficiently deal with the roaches. You do end up in situations where your ground army has been destroyed, and yes, some Void Rays clean it up, but they don't do it in an efficient enough way. They don't do it quick enough so that you keep losing all your ground army. And it just doesn't really work out for the cost they are of 250, 150. You'd be much better off with a 250, 100 Immortal that can absolutely pound through the roaches very quickly, if that's what you're trying to counter. So beware of what counters you're actually building, and whether it makes sense for what the opponent is actually doing. The Zerg players expanded to 3 bases here. The Protoss does have 2 bases up, but he doesn't take the gases here. That's usually the actual resource that you should be looking for as Protoss. That's the area that you're going to be starved out on, a lot of Protoss army is not only mineral heavy but very gas heavy. Getting a lot of sentries up, getting Colossus up, getting any of these higher tech units up is actually quite gas intensive, so that's usually going to be your main restriction on what you can build. So very quickly after taking your expansions, you should be looking at taking those gases and getting them saturated so that you can facilitate your production going forward. Again, checking back at the warp gates, they're completely off cooldown, nothing's being built. A lot of this, again, is due to habitual supply blocking at 99 out of 100, and just now putting a pylon down. So the pylons are going down very reactively, as opposed to ahead of time, and that really costs a lot, and it's part of the reason that money is accumulating here. Again, we've got full chrono boost that could be getting things out faster. This one's not full yet, but it hasn't ever been used. I don't think a chrono boost has been used in this game. It's a very important mechanic that you do need to be using to get your production up quicker, to get drones out quicker, or probes out quicker. Again, not making any more at these nexuses. Still no upgrades going down here. There's really no scouting information going on as well. He does know that there is a third here, but he's not really looking around. Has an observer here that isn't really looking around, trying to track the army or anything like that. He just kind of put it in place, and it's stayed there for the entire game. So you're not getting a lot out of this other than, okay, there's a spire. But he doesn't even know if it's corruptors, if it's mutas, doesn't know what the composition of the army is at this point, just due to being really, really passive in scouting. A few gateways being added on, which is good. He can definitely support more facilities than this, but he isn't even using the ones that he has, so it's a little bit pointless to be tacking them on when he's not actually even using the ones that are available to him. The Twilight Council going down to facilitate more upgrades to be placed, but he's not using any of the level up 1 upgrades at all, not getting anything once that is done. So just kind of question, why is this building even here if you're not going to use it at all? Definitely he should have been expanding probably 8 minutes ago or so into a third base. You're going to end up in a situation of getting mined out at your main very quickly. So we see that the roach engagement does go on. The roaches have 1/1 upgrades, and in this is a great concave. The roaches are completely doomed here. There's no air support, nothing to take out the void rays, and obviously these stalkers just do a pretty good job against roaches, particularly if you get that sort of arc around them and they're trying to come down a ramp. They were just kind of doomed from the beginning. But here, this is very odd. Attacking your own Stargate is not generally what you should be doing. He does manage to stop that before he actually kills the thing. But generally, after destroying an army of that size, taking almost no losses whatsoever, your first thought should be to counterattack, that I should be doing something moving out. Instead, he does move into his own base, tries to attack his own Stargate, and that's obviously not what you want to be seeing. This attack does come, but it's a bit slow, a bit undirected. He knows that there's a third base here, so usually your goal should be to actually deny that third base, to go and take that out so that your opponent isn't getting further ahead of you. By engaging in here against these against all these mutalisks, that again, they've got a +1 attack versus no upgrades on this. The Protoss, if he had been keeping up with the upgrades, should have been able to completely decimate and walk over this army. That was a very well-composed army to take out the force that the Zerg player had, and given the way that the Zerg player actually attacked, where he came in with the mutas first, and then only later on brought a wave of roaches in, he should have been able to take those out very, very cleanly if he had had slightly better unit composition and upgrades available on those units. A few sentries in to hold off the to both force field out the roaches and put up some Guardian shields to help prevent some of the attacks from being as strong would have made a huge difference, and just upgrades on the troops would have made that an absolute walkover, and he would have won the game right there. But instead we have that entire force pushed back, and now at an extreme supply disadvantage. Back home, we see that the main has been completely mined out at this point, but these probes are just sitting there idle. Again, production is completely sitting there idle. Literally, 2 of the production facilities are actually being used. Again, this was built, no upgrades are actually done, no upgrades are actually done. These gases are still not taken at all, so that's severely restricting what we can do in terms of production, although he's just not producing anyway. Definitely at this point, it should have been done obviously like 11 minutes ago, taking a third base, but once you see that you're actually mined out, you definitely have to take one. Like, even if you don't realize at the time that this is something you need to be doing, this is a pretty clear indication that you need to be out and expanding again. Your opponent's on 3 bases, which you're fully aware of, and really at this point he should be taking half the map. You've just got to be expanding to make sure that your resources are replacing themselves. So here now, even with all the production available to them, we're just not getting enough mineral income to replace anything. So when the fairly cheap and fairly efficient Roach Army comes in, you're just not going to be able to hold it off, even with a bunch of cannons and a lot of production, just due to cost, that it can't be paid for, and that's just whittling them down over time. So the game is basically lost at this point, just due to the inability to actually expand now. He couldn't really expand if he wanted to, because he's got to keep up some production to defend himself. Any expansion he tries to put up would go down very quickly. So, and then these are kind of walk to the gold. If you don't have an expansion and you've got a bunch of extra probes, do long distance mining if you have to until you can get an expansion up. Just do it. It's not very efficient, but if that's what you're doing, if they're otherwise just going to sit there, then you might as well long distance expand with them. You again know that like these gases aren't even being mined out of, and these 2 are sitting there. Those just have to be filled in. A lot of this is going to be obviously completely obvious to most viewers out there, but it was time that I went back to a Bronze League game. There actually we do see some gold mining. The gold does give you a lot, so it's not completely useless to do this, but as soon as he hit 400 minerals, definitely an expansion should be going down there so that he can continue on. In contrast, the Zerg player is just continuing to mine, has moved his, well, these ones are idle, but, you know, moved his idle drones onto other bases, and it just makes all the difference in the world. The Void Rays, once you've lost air control, you can't usually continue with those. Void Rays are pretty good early on against Zerg to kind of go around and harass, but usually you're relying on them not having really any anti-air at all. They're okay when the only anti-air is Queens, and you're maybe denying a third base, you're denying another type of expansion, or you're just trying to hold off an all-in with an air attack against no anti-air. But as soon as you know he's got any form of anti-air pretty much at all, you want to move away from those Void Rays. They're just so expensive, and they don't hold up to things like Mutalisks or Corruptors at all. Anything that has an air attack just takes them out so quickly, and they're so inefficient. Here, obviously, the expansion goes up, and it's taken out very, very quickly. Wasn't even cancelled. You do definitely want to be cancelling those when you know you're going to lose it, but the game has been lost quite some time ago. Zerg obviously on 2-1 on ground, and yeah, still just one attack on the Mutalisks, and these can just walk over everything and destroy the army. So again, to recap, the 3 main issues in this were that there was no cohesion to the strategy here, that we went for a very aggressive 4-gate, but the aggressive 4-gate was interrupted with forges and photon cannons, and ultimately he never actually did the 4-gate. So it was a mix of an aggressive and defensive build, and that just ended up accomplishing nothing at all. So you have to be a little more directed in what you're doing. Am I doing a build to attack? Am I doing a build to defend and expand? Or what am I doing? You have to kind of make a decision. And just because you get, say, scared by a unit or scared what your opponent is doing, find a reasonable way that your build can adapt. If you are going to be very aggressive and then you feel like you can't, still make the attacking army that you are going to be aggressive with and just use it to defend. The best example is probably in Protoss versus Protoss. When you're scared that the opponent is going to 4-gate, very often one of the best responses is just 4-gating and keeping the forces at home. So instead of aborting that plan and putting up a bunch of cannons, which wasn't part of the plan, you'd be better off sticking to the original course of action, but just not going through with the attack portion if you don't feel that it's going to work. But then you've still got the army that could be defending your home there. The expansions obviously have to be going down a lot quicker. The resources have to actually be taken. This expansion has been mining for 17 minutes or so, but none of the gas was taken from this expansion at all, and obviously he ends up not having enough. You do have to continue to expand to a 3rd and a 4th base as the game goes on. Not only should this have been taken a lot sooner, but you have to be then expanding to the other places, particularly once your main is completely mined out. You have absolutely no choice to expand. You should be doing that before that happens anyway, but when that occurs, you have absolutely no choice but to go somewhere else and expand to that area. And the last point is really the upgrades. That upgrades have to be used during the game, or else you're just going to get walked over. They make a really big difference. I know it may not seem like that much, like +1 to an attack when it was already doing 13 or 14 may not seem like a lot, but it really does. Particularly on the armor side a lot of the time, if you're reducing the incoming attacks, that makes a big difference, specifically against Mutalisks, where they do kind of a multiple attack splash damage. Having Guardian Shields up from your sentries, getting that extra armor on your units really does reduce that damage by a whole lot, a surprisingly large amount. And also using sentries in your army to help force field out roaches. If you just let roaches come in and attack you as they want to in a big concave, they're really good. They're really cost efficient, particularly with any upgrades. Their upgrades scale better than they do in the Protoss army anyway, so during the game, even if you're both keeping up with upgrades, the roaches will become comparatively better the longer the game goes on and the more upgrades they have. So you need the force fields there to be able to disrupt that and prevent them from getting that perfect arc, so that you can deal with one part of the army at a time as opposed to just having them swarm on you. So all of those things really add up to a bit of a complete failure on Jakesully's point in this game, but those are the things that can be improved, and they're luckily easy things to improve on. Just make a mental note, hey, at 7-8 minutes in a game, if I haven't expanded yet, I should. At 12 minutes in a game, probably for a bronze player, at 12 minutes in a game, if you haven't taken a 3rd yet, you probably should. So just keep that sort of thing in mind. Force yourself to do these things. What I did for myself coming up is very often, particularly against Zerg, you'll often feel like it's not safe to take a 3rd base. Force yourself to do it in a few games anyway, and you'll be surprised at how often it doesn't get taken out. You may feel like it's vulnerable. Oh, if he runs a bunch of lings in there right now, he could take it out. You'd be surprised how often you can actually get it up and established and then defend it, even though you didn't have something to defend it at the time, just because they don't happen to hit that window of 30 seconds to a minute where they could have ran a bunch of lings in and taken it out. So just do it, even if it doesn't feel safe, and you'll eventually learn what is and what isn't safe. So be a little riskier early and then safen up afterwards. Anyway, I'm going on too long on this one. It's going to be obviously obvious to most viewers, but I did want to get back to a bronze versus bronze game and really start at the basics, and I think that's it.